Good morning. What a great opportunity to play EDM music to wake everybody up this morning. I'm a huge fan of EDM music, so I love the opportunity to get that played anywhere so everyone can fall in love with it like I do. I want to first of all welcome you all to Sacramento. This is the home of a government that is firmly committed to pioneering offshore wind for the United States, floating offshore wind for the United States, and it's also home to a legislature that's committed to renewable energy as a whole. And it's also home to the greatest NBA basketball team in history, the Sacramento Kings, who I promise you next year are going to win an NBA championship, finally, after years of despair in the city of Sacramento. It's been 12 months since I spoke to all of you. It's been an exciting 12 months for the wind industry in California. In December, I'm sure this has been talked about ad nauseum, BOEM announced the winners of a competitive auction for the development rights in 5 call areas off the California coast. These bids totaled $757 million, which is a total I'm going to touch on a little bit later for a different reason. In addition to that, we saw some exciting developments in California state waters, which I want to touch on first. In November, the state building trades announced a historic partnership with Floventus to build the Catamo project off the coast of California, off of Vandenberg Air Force Base's coast. Floventus is a joint venture between Sierco and SBM Offshore, 2 leaders in the offshore energy sector. The Catamo project is a 60-megawatt demonstration project that, like I said, is in state waters, the only project currently proposed in state waters. Hopefully we'll change that eventually. The project labor agreement that we negotiated with Floventus is truly going to be revolutionary for the state of California. It's more than just the first such agreement in the state. The agreement was negotiated to be the framework of all future project labor agreements for offshore wind in California. I want you to know that this was not something that we or Floventus took lightly. Floventus was a good representative of the industry as a whole, ensuring that the agreement worked for developers of all of these historic projects. We worked diligently from the trade side to make sure the agreement brought the priorities of all stakeholders from the workforce side to the table. The result of these negotiations was an agreement that will resonate through California for decades. This standardized project labor agreement allows now the BOEM leaseholders the opportunity to expedite the process of engaging with the skilled and trained workers of California's construction trades. This means in communities up and down the North Coast and communities around the Central Coast, opportunities will abound for pathways to the middle class for a whole new generation of workers. The SBCTC team and Floventus have streamlined the process for all that follow. This is going to be good for everyone that comes along to develop offshore wind in the state of California. When it comes to renewable energy projects in California, the State Building and Construction Trades Council has a strong track record of fighting for streamlining and fighting for these projects to get pushed across the finish line. That's why developers work with us and engage with us on a regular basis. We've helped usher streamlining bills through California's legislature that will help make the infrastructure improvements needed to get California's offshore wind sector into the water. We've also fought to secure funding for port improvements, infrastructure that needs to be in place before we deploy these resources across the state. For the most part, California has done a lot to help keep the development of offshore wind on track, but there is still more work to do. As a state, we must acknowledge that there is significant work left to bring these projects to fruition. The $757 million total for the California BOEM auctions should serve as a wake-up call about how much work we actually still have to do. The disparity between the nearly $4.4 billion that was committed for the 6 lease areas off the coast of New York and the total in California is staggering. Obviously, it's representative of the differences in technology between floating platforms and fixed bottom, but consider that California is the largest energy market in the United States. The transmission grid needs substantial work. That factored into the disparity. California must bring investor-owned utilities to the table. We need to do that because developers, like the people that are in this room, need to secure procurement agreements before these projects hit the water. I spoke to the governor's office, and I know they're as committed to offshore wind in California as we are, and taking a leadership role in bringing these projects online as quickly as possible. I am also committed to working with the governor and the legislature to bring these projects online as quickly as possible, maybe even quicker than the timelines that we've been talking about already. I'm also committed to finalizing the individual agreements with the 5 BOEM lease winners, using the framework of the CATMO PLA as quickly as possible. These agreements will bring all trades, from electricians and laborers to operating engineers and carpenters, into the mix. They provide labor harmony, ensuring developers aren't stuck mitigating jurisdictional disputes. These agreements have worked on every construction project that they've been applied on. They work in every sector of the industry, from energy to housing and from retail to heavy highway work. They've also worked in private and public settings mutually. They are the gold standard of labor agreements across the country, and they are the only thing that will be acceptable as we build out the renewable platforms in California, including offshore wind. I want to close by talking about the opportunities that have flown under the radar around California's offshore wind future. We've talked about the opportunities for workers. We've talked about communities on the North Coast and the Central Coast benefiting from these historic investments. What we don't talk about are the opportunities for ports outside of Humboldt, outside of Los Angeles, to play a role in building out renewable technologies like offshore wind in California. The CATMO project, which is a demonstration project to begin with, is demonstrating for us that there are other opportunities outside of these areas that we've traditionally talked about. They plan to have the Port of San Francisco play a role in deploying their project into California waters. They're demonstrating that there's opportunities for ports that we're not talking about, opportunities that need to be seized. This opens the possibility of more communities and workers from those communities benefiting from California's historic offshore energy future. This opens the door to manufacturing taking place in areas that we're not talking about today. So my challenge is this: to every California port, find out what role you can play in deploying California's offshore wind. Lift up your communities along the way by doing so. We can all play a part in building California's renewable future. The State Building Trades is committed to working with willing partners to get these projects built, to get them put in California waters, and to make sure that the climate plans and the climate goals that we've established as a state come to fruition. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.